That's what you're... It's Wednesday, November 30th, 1980.
I wasn't rolling when I said ready.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so go ahead.
Today is Wednesday, November 30th, 1988. I'm in the CKND television studios in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. My name is Audrey Robbie, and I'll be interviewing Mr. Max Nordon of 848 Jubilee Avenue, Winnipeg, Manitoba.
You can begin.
Okay, what should I do? Should I...
You can just have them in your lap. Let's begin at the beginning, Mr. Nordon. Can you tell us where you were born?
I was born in a small city called Radomsko in Poland.
In what year?
1926. I do not know the city because we moved out when I was about... My father died and we moved out to Lodz. I was about 2 or 4 years old. I don't remember the city at all.
So your home essentially was in Lodz?
Lodz. I was raised in Lodz.
Can you tell me something about your family? Your father died when you were very young.
Yeah. My family was a very Orthodox family. Our ancestors were from a rabbinical family. Very Orthodox, middle class, or a little higher than middle class, on European standards.
Mm-hmm.
I would say very intelligent.
Was education very important to you?
Very important, very important.
You told me you come from a very large family in terms of your brothers and sisters.
We were 14 people. This includes my mother. Now, I told you something else, that my father had a wife before. He remarried. He had 4 children from the first wife. And what is we had 9 children from the other wife. So we had 13 together. Now, we are a very close-knit family. I personally didn't know that we are not from the same mother until in the war I was told that. So it shows how close we were. So I didn't see my sister, I seen her as a sister. We were all from the same father.
How did you fit in with all these children?
Well, they were all older than I am. I was. Now I'm coming there.
Mm-hmm.
They teased me because I was the smallest, I was the shortest, and I was the youngest. I had nephews, which were much older than I am. I had brothers which had already children which were older than I am. It's from this first... So I was teased. They called me uncle, and I was... looked up, a man with a beard called me uncle, and I was that big. So that's what bothered me then. So they teased me, just because it bothered me. Otherwise, in education, I had a lot of help. The war broke up my education. I had help in Jewish education from my brother because all went to yeshivas. They all could become rabbis if they wanted to, but they didn't. Instead, one became a chartered accountant, another one had a factory of men's stockings, and another one did something else. Now, for my sisters, I had the normal education help. They brought me books, they chose books for me. As I tell you, I knew about Jack London when I was 3 or 4 years old already. I didn't read it in English, but I read it in Polish. Could read Yiddish. We spoke German in the house, too, because they're German books, like Heinrich Heine, and you could see in our house Shakespeare, and also the Talmud. So that's the kind, I'll give you an idea what family. It was a very religious family.
And you said very close, too. You have some pictures of your sisters here with you? Well, one of yourself, too.
Oh, this is of myself. This was made about a half a year after the war. This I found, by coincidence, I found a nephew in Germany which was alive, stayed alive, I mean. Coming there, somebody told me about it, and coming there, I found that he had 3 sisters which stayed alive too. And I came to that place by a hitched ride, and it was right after the war, about a half year. But came in the house, one fainted, and one because they knew I was taken away before everybody else. Didn't expect me to live. And next day, my nephew took me out, went to a tailor, bought some cloth, and made me a suit. That's why I'm dressed a little different here than when I was in the camp. That's all I can tell you about that.
And your sister's pictures you kept with you?
Yes. Now, this is one sister. Her name was Rivka. She was married already when I was born. Those nephews and nieces that I talked about, that were her children. And this is another sister. That picture I found, my nephew found it, and we reproduced a few, so. Well, that's all I can tell. If you want to know more, you ask me.
Okay. What sort of work did your father do?
My father was a businessman. He owned, at that time, he owned land. He also owned a sheep farm. He owned forests, and they cut wood in those forests. But he was not involved. It was a small little villages. He was not involved directly, and he just owned it. He put his brothers and uncles, which managed that, the workers, and they managed. He himself was more in textiles and business. He used to go business, just other kinds of business.
And after he died, your mom was the support of the family?
Yes, there was, my mom was the support of the family, and because all my brothers came from the yeshivas and all that thing, we weren't too grown up. There was some money left, but it was going fast. And when they had the depression here, there was a depression there too. Everything was very expensive. And when the money ran out, she started selling jewelry. She had quite a bit of jewelry, her own. She started selling off that jewelry until some of my brothers grew up, and they started picking up from there. As I told you, one brother became a chartered accountant, one had a factory, opened a factory. So they already took over from my mother, but they got married later. But still, the others grew up too, and they started.
Can you tell me about your education before the war?
My education, it wasn't great, you know. I was 13 years old when the war broke out. I went to a private, modern Jewish religious school. It was called Gershonella List. Everybody knows, everybody which was in Europe knew about it. But I didn't have a chance for education. I started in public school. That's what you want to know, I suppose. And my brothers did not agree for me going to public school because I didn't learn no Jewish there. Because I could pick it up at home, but they didn't agree. My sister said yes. So for a while, I went to a public school.
But I think you mentioned this was a very short while.
Very short while, a couple months, something like that. I was taken out from there, and there was a discussion at home, of which I had no say. And the decision was a compromise. I should go to a modern. My brothers wanted me to send me to a more religious, how do you call, more orthodox school. My sister said no. So I landed up in a very modern, religious private school. They taught everything what had public education, like public school, also Jewish education. We also learned a little bit English. That's when I came here, people were surprised that I knew a word or two. mind you, I didn't speak good, but I understood already. And see, that English came in. It was a law that you had to have another language, learn another language in the school, even in public school. The practice was German, mostly. But since Hitler came to power, German was a little unpopular. So they switched to start teaching English. It was a short time, but I learned a few words. And I could, if I'd hear somebody speak, I could understand a little bit.
You mentioned that your family was a very observant family.
Very observant, very religious. Shomer Shabbos, like I said, didn't work in the Shabbat. Very observant, that's all I can say. Very orthodox. They even went to rabbis, not a rabbi, but you know, a rabbi, what it is, more than a rabbi, but I don't know how to translate it. Yeah.
So at the time that, just before the war, you were going to school, you were 13 years old, living with your family,
right.
And had friends and were busy.
I had friends, I played football, I, like any other kid, used to ride horses, I loved horses. There were places where you can rent for 25 cents, you could ride a horse for an hour. So I used to go there, played soccer, not Canadian football. And it was like any other boy. I mean, normal. I believe normal, you know.
And what were some of the first things you noticed when things started to change before the war? What were some of the rumors you were hearing?
There's a lot of things. But I did not know that has a connection with war. Even style and clothing changed. Let's say, you're talking about just before the war. People started coming out with boots, high boots. They used to wear coats, at that time, raglan sleeves, you know, no sleeves. Then they came out with belts. That was just style. But everybody observed it, something, everybody felt something in the air. The styles are not like it used to be, like a lady wore, didn't wear high boots. Everything fashionable, tailor-made. Then people with belts and all that, it shows. Here, people, I don't think people realize that style has to do with the time, with I learned. Time changes, time comes rougher, you see the style will change, everything changes.
So what were some of the rumors that were starting to filter through Lodz?
Well, what period are you talking about?
This was, say, maybe in a year or two before.
A year or two before, that's what I'm telling you. There were rumors that Hitler's no Jew friend, that's for sure. But then the Poles weren't too much of Jewish friends either. But we lived with them. We had to get along somehow. They had to work. We had to eat, the Jews had to eat, and they had factories or something, both worked. We got along somehow. Also with Germans, as a matter of fact, we got along better than with the Poles.
So you were telling me you had one of your best friends.
I had a best friend living in the same block. He had a dog, his dog was Rex. He used to go to German school, German Polish school, you know, private, at the gymnasium. Was in the street where we lived. I used to go to my Jewish school, but after school we all both came together and started playing. Either baseball, not baseball, football, or we fought. I played with a dog. We even came out to have a snack. He came out to our house, we had a snack. So we lived in the family stew. They were very friendly. Not only us, all Jewish families, with the German families, they even voted in the same member of parliament sometimes. In a block, they voted there like blocks, parties. And suddenly, a sudden change, as soon Hitler came to power, it still was okay with him. They didn't bother too much. They were afraid. But when soon the war broke out, and the German troops, a few days later, came into Lodz, to the city, they were the first to start hitting the people they were friends with. Beat them up, took the business away, and they knew where everything is. Nobody did hide anything. They were in business too. took away the businesses, they grabbed people to work, people they knew. So people couldn't understand, the Jewish people couldn't understand how to be friends. Like Lodz, 1793 it started to, can I?
Yeah, that's fine.
Lodz was a city. It started at 1793 with a population of 191 people. In 1939, before the war broke out, there was 750,000 people with 250,000 Jews in it, which was almost a majority Jews. The biggest industrial city in Europe, besides Manchester, if you heard about Manchester in England, was called, matter of fact, the Polish Manchester. Business was done, Jews and Germans were mostly in business and manufacturing of textiles. And the German people in Poland spoke Jewish better than some Jewish people did, you know. Even when they were in the small towns, they even knew the Jewish prayers. And they said it not in a broken Hebrew, only Ashkenazic European Hebrew. And how, that's why the people could not understand from 1793 living together, doing business together, and change overnight.
Were you active in any Zionist groups in your youth at all?
Yeah, I was. My brothers belonged to Aguda. I started to belong to the organization when I was about 9, 10 years old. I joined the revisionist, the Beitar. Begin was the commander of Beitar, you know. But we had a different branch in Lodz. And my family didn't know, because it would be like I would have left my fate. I mean, to belong to Beitar, we learned how to keep a gun, we learned how to shoot, you know. It was built on the basis of not paramilitary, but Jabotinsky, the leader of Beitar, says we have to know how to shoot, because it's trouble. There'll be trouble, might be trouble, and then we talked about homeland there already.
How did you get involved in the group?
Through a friend.
Yeah.
One day he got a call for a meeting. It came by mail. Up to a certain time, with half a year, 3/4 of a year, nobody knew. And then it started a chaos in the house. I'm becoming a goy. You know, something bad has happened. How come you belong there? And I was stubborn. I said, I like it there.
How did they find out at home?
By mail. I got a card,
oh.
a postcard. They called me for a meeting. And later on, when I got a little older, they had a militia, their own militia. And that militia, we like to keep order. If a speaker comes, we did not need. Usually police were guarding, let's say, a hall where a speaker came from an organization to speak, and a lot of people. When we came, there was no police. We were our own police. We learned how to march, we learned how to shoot, how to take a gun, a rifle. And that's what was disliked in Poland by Jews. It's not nice. You mean you have a gun or something, what's crazy or something like that. And also we trained because Polish people, though we lived together and we were friends together, some of them didn't like Jews and it tried like pogrom things. In smaller towns it happened. And Lodz we trained to keep 2x4s. If we smelled something's coming, while people ran in, we were trained to go out in the street. And it happened at one time, so we started hitting back. Stones or rocks. There were areas in Lodz where, let's say, a hooligan we call. We don't talk about all Polish people here. There were Polish organizations which were like the Nazis. There came a holiday or something that tried to get into the Jewish area, which happens to be the area which later became the Ghetto. There were Polish people living there too. Christian people I'm talking about, they lived nicely together, but there were disturbers, and lots of them. So that area, if one of them came in, he got a beating. They were afraid to go those streets. That doesn't mean they attacked everybody. We knew already who's who. You live in areas like that, or you live in a country like that. By the look, by the smell, you know what that person is out. The Lodz never had any. Once there was a pogrom, and the pogrom people got a beating. They were chased away.
Now, you were saying that in August 1939, a group of boys were organized.
Yes.
Yeah.
For the air
raid.
Yeah, and August, I can tell you the date if you don't mind.
Sure.
Give me a little bit of time. I don't know where I wrote it down. Anyway, in August, about the 26th or something like that, it's not important, the date. But August 24th, I'll go a day before. There was mobilization. The army was mobilized. In August 26th, there was an appeal from the mayor of the city to come dig anti-aircraft ditches. Instead of bomb, they wanted to make a frontier or something for army, and then if bombs fall, we're supposed to go and jump in a ditch. Now we dug it all over where there was a boulevard and parks, and everybody came. I came home, every kid had to ask their permission from the parents whether they can go. Not only the kids went, they got permission, but everybody who was free went. At that day, they said there was about 50,000 people digging ditches. Mm-hmm. And they also organized the air defense guard, which means we had to watch, it should be dark outs, you know. If it's a raid, if it's alarm, they didn't have the automatic alarm signs. So you had like copper plates. And when it was on the radio, an announcement, the radio had made announcements, it's supposed to beat that thing, and people ran down and hide in basements or something like that. We didn't expect, we didn't expect a war like that, you know. People who remembered wars didn't expect what happened then. So it was OPL, right.
Now, going to
we also had watch in front of the port and the street if something happened. We had to watch a little bit.
Going to September 1st, 1939.
Yeah.
What happened on that
What
day?
happened, people did not believe whatever happened in those things, mobilization. I have to tell you, just before that, I came over digging ditches. The next day was 26th sometimes. And this date I got a reference, I remember, because of didn't remember the date, but I got it. Came home, I seen people, that was mobilization already, general mobilization. I've seen people in the street, civilians carrying heavy machine guns. In the street, I didn't know what's going on. I didn't know about the mobilization. But one sight which I'd never seen, there were Jews in the army. I used to see them coming to the synagogue, marched in by a sergeant every Saturday, but in uniforms. The general mobilization was for reservists. So I've seen on our street, that area was populated mostly by Jewish people. Jewish people with locks, with pairs, you know, side locks, long garb, carrying heavy machine guns. That was a sight I never seen, you know. Turned out those were reservists, former soldiers, which went back to their religious thing. I ran up home, and I said, "But I've seen this." I said, "You're crazy. He doesn't know what he's talking about." Like Jewish soldiers, Bachurim with pairs carrying machine guns. They went down. My mother went down. We lived on the third floor. We didn't have an elevator. My brother went down, and that's what we've seen. So we've seen what's happening, but people did not believe that there'll be a war. You couldn't convince nobody there'll be a war. The Poles did not believe it'll be a war because Hitler would not attack Poland. Poland had one of the strongest, or the strongest army in Europe, only they were not armed right. There was an agreement between Britain, France, and Poland that as soon as war will start or something, they'll come and help. Now we can get to the first, when the attack started. Well, the Germans attacked at dawn. We didn't know. People still did not believe, although it was an air alarm a day before, the 31st. It was called off. The first, it was some rumors that something was going on somewhere far away on the border. Came the older people who remembered war. He said, a war is not a war, it has to be declared. And then it starts, even in war, it is said it's a civilized manner, you know. But Germany attacked Poland without civilized manner, without declaring a war, undeclared, suddenly. And I was standing, Ergat was, the war started, I heard about 4 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning. I didn't know there's war. But I stood guard with that, for the air defense, and the street was early, everybody was sleeping. Suddenly from a distance, our street was a long, long street, very long. Like a Portage Avenue, even longer. I've seen something come towards, was it down? I didn't know what, but I seen something, a kind of a mass is coming from a distance. And I didn't have to wait long. About 10, 15 minutes, I've seen the mass. There were horse-drawn farm carriages with Polish soldiers, bloodied, bandaged. And I've seen already I realized well, before that. That was before that. It was not the retreat. For about 1 o'clock, September the 1st, nobody believed this war. Suddenly, mid-noon time, people came running on the street with bloodied heads, blood running from their arms, and people started talking, what happened? He said, we were attacked at Wichkaliska Airway. This is about quite a few miles away from the city. Well, a big city, you know. They were machine gunned and bombed. The bomb fell. We didn't even hear it in Center City. Then people started already realizing something is happening. There is war. Up to 1 o'clock, in my courtyard, in that street, there was no war. All the people were already dying, and the Germans were already crossed the border. The radio did not want to announce it. As a matter of fact, they announced at those days, even 2 days later, that Polish troops went over the border to Germany. And the Germans are getting a beating. And that the French and the British promise materialized. They bombarded Berlin, which wasn't true. They never came, they never helped.
So once it was official, what happened?
Well, it was official. People got excited, but they still didn't believe. Then started another thing. They figured the war would last about 5-6 days. Because the Germans can't fight against England and France and Poland. They didn't believe that the Allies would drop Poland, you know, they left them on their own.
So what happened in your family now?
Nothing happened. Everybody was scared. There's war, but we didn't think too much. It's also the same. It'll take a few days and it'll be over. Then we have to move away from that day because there still wasn't to believe. Then they said the Germans will not attack Poland. Then they said they won't penetrate Poland that fast because of our army and all that, you know. That was September the 1st, and we realized there's war already. I was standing guard. We stood guard every day. Nobody slept very good those days, you know. September the 2nd, I'm not sure, I think. The 2nd, I think. I stood guard with another boy. That's when I started before. We've seen that mass coming. And when it came close, we've seen already a retreat, Polish. We didn't know about retreat, but Polish soldiers wounded and on horse-drawn wagons. Beside the wagons, Polish soldiers also wounded were walking, holding on. And then we've seen masses and masses of soldiers going back. Now, I rang the alarm like there would be an air raid. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what's happening. The people woke up and they came down, and all the people said it's a retreat. They've seen already what's happening. And it was going all day like that. Nobody knew what to do, when to do. The radio announcements were contradictory for what we see. He had announced that Poland is attacking, Polish planes attacked Breslau and went through the border, again the same. And here we've seen the troops going the other direction, you know, backwards. So it was a confusion, that's all it was.
And then there was the call out to mobilize.
Right, then about the third or fourth, the date is not exact. Everybody who had the radio outside, and people didn't sleep, as I told you from then on. There was a call from a certain general, which nobody heard about, but people didn't pay attention, that all people able to bear arms, another man, I didn't say reservists or something, should go with the army to defend Warsaw, the capital. It became a chaos. And all men came down and said, we are called, we go. Some were reservists, which the Polish government had no time to call in. And some weren't reserved, they weren't soldiers, nothing. The problem was, all the kids started coming down, and they started preparing to leave Lodz to defend Warsaw, little kids like that. And I went too, you know, and I was a little older.
You were with your brothers then?
I was with my brothers, not all brothers. One brother lived in another street, and I found out later that he didn't listen he realized what's happening and didn't go. I'll explain to you what happened. Okay, my mother was as I told you, we come from a very American family. My mother was, how you call it, person believing in holy things, and like clothing from a rabbi was like a medicine for something, a superstition, right? And we had a pantry, like a bookcase, let's say, but it was closed with glass windows, glass doors, or mirror doors. Well, it was a big wall almost of books, the Shasta, Talmud, all kinds of books. And when people came in, they wanted to see something, they took out a book. You could have a book for references. There was 2 drawers under those doors. Nobody has a right to touch, unless my mother opened it. And one drawer, she had a talus and tefillin. You know what that is? Used to be my father's, so that's what it was. Another drawer, and I was always wondering, it was a mystery, you know. I was told it's something holy you're not supposed to touch. The other drawer, she had a talus also, an old talus. Once in a while when she opened it, I seen it almost shredded. A pair of twin, very big, which we had twin, but small ones. And a coat, they called it a schlafrock. Rabbis used to wear that in daytime. It was warm, it was nice. It was all threaded, it was like threads almost. And we had rucksacks made on fast, like, you know, from anything you got.
Yeah.
My mother came down with all those 3 things. She took the talus and put it in my bag. She said, "Them schut, you know what a schut is? This will bring you home alive, healthy." The other brother got the schlafrock, or vice versa, something like that. The one brother got the twill. There's a 4th brother. You got nothing. But she said, you come home. I believe she was like the superstition, you come home in health and okay. If you don't put this away. We said goodbye and we started marching, going out in the street. There was thousands and thousands and thousands of people walking. Grown-up men, a little less grown-up men, children, people with buggies, with babies, and there was masses. Lodz was 700, and there were people coming from other towns around to the main street. We went out on a street called Brzezinska Street, which took you out of the city. And we were walking until we came out past the Jewish cemetery. There was already fields there. Came out there, we've seen soldiers mixed up with children. We've seen a couple tanks not being able to move because of the masses of civilians going. Light cavalry they still had with horses. Everything, the military and the civilians were all mixed up. Nobody could move, actually. It moved very slow. And we walked towards Warsaw. The nearest town was a town called Brzezina. That day when we walked, we've seen already German planes flying, strafing people, shooting, but it didn't come to us yet. We went further. We've seen ditches dug by people before. There was about one ditch we've seen. It was about 7 people there. And the German planes were coming on. Not only the gun, the Polish Air Force was gone. So they flew right low over your head. You could see the pilots and lighter planes looking down or shoot with their revolver, Suddenly the German planes came on. One of our brother Moshe, he said we should jump in that ditch. We all jumped in, like 3 together jumped in, and then suddenly he said, let's get out. I don't know why he said it. And he's seen a field, the potato field. He says, let's get out and run to the potato field and lay down there in the potatoes. As soon as we ran out, other people went in. We didn't reach the potato field. A bomb fell in that ditch. And the people, all them, I presume they were dead. I didn't see them dead. But they couldn't get out alive because it was an explosion. People died around it too. Then my brother said we won't go that way anymore. We go down through fields because nobody moved and it's very dangerous. So we found a path close to a little bush, but still in the fields. And we were walking, and suddenly a light German plane comes and started shooting with a machine gun. Now I said to fall in the potatoes. It's the only place it could fall in. He didn't hit nobody. We lay down for a while. We got up like he had, all his aim was, we were walking out in a group of about 5, 6 people. There was some others on there too. Like, we are the main aim of the whole war. We stood up, started walking. The guy came back and started shooting machine gun. We fell down. Didn't hit nobody. I think he got fed up, not being able to, he flew away. We started walking. We walked until we came to that town called Brzezina, I told you. We came in there were already masses of people, mostly Jewish people. Many people. There was nowhere to move. Suddenly came Polish cavalry. They went into the town, and we see them going through the whole town, then we see them going back. And half an hour later, they come around. So the realization was that we are surrounded. I mean, they have no way out. Since I am, if you want to shorten it, you tell me. Since I am the youngest, so all brothers decided that they should care for me. I mean, I probably sleep overnight. We came in some kind of a room with thousands of people. That house was occupied also from refugees or people going to defend Warsaw, as they're called, by a rabbi from Pabianic, Mendle of Pabianic. People, Orthodox people will know who he was. He was a son of the rabbi, which I had a talus in. My brothers went, and see, a rabbi is supposed to give Shalom Aleichem. They found him. They gave Shalom Aleichem, and he came back, and they looked for a place. It gotten dark already, where to sleep. There was nowhere to sleep, because every room was taken with many people. But I found a bed, a steel bed. Said, that'll be for you, because you're the youngest, you have to sleep, have a good sleep. But it turned out, and they were sitting around the bed, on the floor. It turned out that the bed had a steel spring. It was the mattress, it was, the spring, but that's all they could find, had a hole in it. It turned out it was the worst place to sleep, and I couldn't get out. Because there were so many people sitting around, I couldn't get out the whole night, almost broke in half. Next morning, I came, it was very early in the morning. He was hungry, so my brother, that brother Moshe, went around the town. He found a herring. So we ate it, and we were very thirsty, that makes you thirsty. It wasn't funny, but it sounds that way. And then my brother Moshe, he was more practical. He was a very practical man. He's seen things the way they are. You've seen that cavalry, he explained, that cavalry, you can see they go there and go back, they go there and go back, they're surrounded, they can't get out. That means the whole area is surrounded, otherwise they go either to Warsaw or either somewhere. So he says, we go home. Another brother says, we're supposed to go to Warsaw. He says, there's no use going. If Lodz is surrounded, the army has already passed it, otherwise that cavalry wouldn't be there. They would have been further out. And one brother said, when? He says, right now. He was like the general there, the commander, If Moshe says now, we go now. And we walked back. There was another few people joined the group. Started walking back, we go into potato fields, and he said, we're not going the same way because there's no use on that highway, but it's dangerous, and there are probably masses of people still. He found a little forest with a little path. We go back that way. Yeah, that's one thing I forgot. We're going back, but also planes were coming towards Brezhina, that town. And we lay down. Since my brothers were in the air, we heard bombs falling, but it didn't hit the people were away quite a ways already. Bombs falling, we thought either it's very close, it must have been that town, that prison or something. You know what a vida is? A prayer before death? That? Every Jew is supposed to say a vida before death. It's like a confession and Christian thing, you're supposed to say. My brother Moshe said we all should say a vida, just in case we shouldn't die without having said it. So he said it, and we followed what he said. I figured we are dead already. I figured if you say a vida, you are dead. I was a kid, I didn't realize, but I was walking. I seen us still walking, but I must be dead. It's only people who are dying. And we walked back, he found a part in a little forest. The bombing stopped, and we walked back. Now we're walking in that little forest, walked for a while, tired, thirsty, hungry, Suddenly a guy there, we've seen soldiers coming. One soldier, he took his rifle, aimed at us, he says, I'm going to kill in Polish. I'll say it in English, I'm going to kill you Jews, dirty Jews. Well, he's going to kill us. We had no way of escaping, So my brother, we stood there, he held the rifle. Suddenly we hear a voice from the back. He says, if you don't take that rifle away, I'll blow your head off. We turned around, it was a soldier, he says in Jewish, go, don't worry. That other guy put the rifle down, his gun, Either he made a joke or just threat, but we weren't sure. He could have done it too. After that we were walking, nothing happened. We walked to a town. We came to a town called Widzew. That's where one of the biggest textile manufacturing company was in Poland. It belonged to a Jewish man called Korn. He had about 10,000 people working there. Well, he, I think, perished together with others. And anyway, we walked and went in town in Widzew. And they didn't have running water there. They had wells, the well. And usually, when you ran down, there was a cup there or something, and people were walking. That was the custom. The people from the town said we shouldn't drink the water because it's poison. You don't know whether it was true or not, or maybe it was just a spite. It could have been done. They knew it was a very hot day. But we marched on. We came to the city, to Lodz. It was in the evening, after noon, close to evening. We came in, not through the side. We left exactly the opposite side of the end of the street, that same street, but the exact opposite side. And slowly we walked, and came home. The old brothers came home. So my mother says, you see, you came home because of that, those things she gave us.
And when was the city occupied?
We came in, there was nobody there. There was such a quiet there that the quiet scared you. There was no people in the street when we walked home. We didn't see nothing. It didn't look like war. They didn't bombard Lodz because they wanted, Lodz was a very rich city, they wanted it all. And they got it. Anyway, there was such a quiet that the city used to be like a Manhattan or Broadway. In fact, Lodz was built in the style of New York. There was avenues and streets. While in the older cities there were all kinds of byway square, right. Yeah. And we walked the whole street, and the fear was not now from anybody, coming from anybody, for the quietness. We never seen that. Even at night, there was always people. Anyway, we came home, and the German army marched in, the 1st Armored Division marched in the 8th of September in the morning. While the radio still announced victories of the Polish army. Now people put it together, they said it's not consistent. Because Lodz was one of the second main city, the capital. If they they wouldn't lose the war, or not retreated, the Germans wouldn't be here. It wasn't consistent with German tanks and Lodz, and holding back the Germans and the news.
Was it soon after the occupation that the decrees came out?
Right when it came in, the decrees came in. The first thing was we have to go for labor. Not labor camps, but work, if called. But we weren't called. We were grabbed. And the labor consisted from the beginning was the Volksdeutsche, the Germans, civilian Germans. They just put people in certain places, schools. There was nothing to work there. They just beat them half dead. People came out with bloody heads. That was the job. Later on, they started grabbing, the army came in. They started, you seen a Jew on the street, they grabbed him to work. Like I was once in the street, I was grabbed to dig ditches. Useless. It was mud. Not I. I talk for myself, but I wasn't alone in that predicament. I was young, so I could move, If you have shovels, we dug ditches in a mud field. Was heavy. And as soon as we dug up that ditch, others dug a ditch before us. Then we had to take that earth, that mud, which was in that ditch, to close the other ditch. And others had to take useless.
So it was make work.
Just work. Yeah. And all the people were falling, were fainting, falling, because it was too hard. It was mud, it was heavy mud. That we stood there all day there. Then they let us go. Now going back, this time I came home direct, it was a long ways. Some were cut to work while going home. They didn't give you no permit, no receipt that they worked or something. People got scared to walk out in the street already. Because you see, it's not funny. Mostly people sat home. Provisions were bought by running from side ways, to a baker or to somebody, to side streets. Most houses had their other entrance. Mm-hmm. And the ones who hadn't just run over to the one who had the other entrance on other streets. It was hell. They were hungry already. It was hard to get food, not because of money, because you couldn't go and buy it. If you reached, then became some kind of a black market. Some people went out, let's say, to a place where the farmers are. In the street, they used to come 2 blocks away. They bought up bread or something. They brought to the courtyards. Mm-hmm. There was an exchange. Some people, we happened to have oil. I don't know why there was oil there. Oil was a big thing. So there was an exchange from one courtyard to the other. They had to have ingenuity to eat, not out being cut there. Work. Okay, that was the second degree that talked about degrees of work, so we couldn't go out. That stopped us going. The second degree came. Also, what was the second degree?
Well, then Jews were not allowed to walk the streets.
Yeah. Jews were not allowed to walk, and that street was the main street, and it was renamed Adolf Hitler Street. And our region was annexed to Germany. I mean, we became the Third Reich. So we couldn't walk. So we were lucky we had another entrance. Those people which were in the middle had to smuggle through and run through. Sometimes they were cut, they were beaten, or cut to work. It's not that they didn't want to work, they just didn't want to be beaten or do. It was very hard. Then came to the degree of run it down to wear a white armband with a blue star. Mm-hmm. Later came to the degree, I won't give dates, I'll go down. The degree that the white armband and the blue star is not enough. You have to have a Star of David, yellow Star of David in front and the back. Then there was a decree coming that they had to organize a Jewish community council. And that community council wasn't far from us. I used to run over and see what's happening. And that council was supposed to have been 24 people. Now we had before a council like that. They ordered a meeting of the whole council, and they came there, and they asked, there was a misunderstanding in the language. Where is the eldest, the Juden? Who is the eldest means who is higher rank. Now, that was understood there. There was an old man called Rumkowski. He figured who is the oldest. Says, I am. Mm-hmm. They made him for, you are the eldest, you are the how do you call it, chairman, yeah. He had white hair. Because of confusion, before the war, he was just a secretary in the community. And the rumor went on that from the 24, they took 17 out, and they shot him on that council, and they told that Rumkowski to find out that disbanded the whole thing. He should be chairman and find another council of 24. That was the other degree. Then came decree and decrees, every day something else. Then came a decree, the old Jews have no right to own jewelry, machines, belts, leather belts, high boots, fur coats, good coats. It's almost nothing, you know. And that has to be brought into a depot and registered. You have to have a receipt that told you, that suggests you'll get paid for it. Radios, musical instruments, sharp knife. Well, if I figure out, you have to undress completely, everything went. And people were scared. Most people were scared and brought the radios, if they had the radio. Not everybody had, but also had it brought partophones, that means the old type of record player. Violin, trombones. Meticulously figured out everything. You almost couldn't wear no shoelaces either. People brought it to the depots, old coats, fur coats. I remember I had to help my sister, because my brother didn't go out, he had a beard and he would be in trouble. Help my sister carry fur coats. Right across the street was a depot. Then came the decree, what else? Then came the decree that the Jewish Council should provide every day so many thousands of people for work, forced labor, for the army, for other city works.
No, I think they're at the end of the first tape now.
I have a date here.
Have a date, okay. Are you okay, ready to start?
Yeah. In January 1940, was an announcement that a ghetto will be established for the Jews, and the Jews will have to live there, in that ghetto. And some Jews lived there already, because from before the war. Now, some Jews, which weren't wise enough, started moving already things like furniture. They made little sleds. It was snow there.
Right.
And put the furniture, some goods, and they took it into the ghetto. Most did not. So
your family was one of the ones who didn't?
No, one of the ones who didn't was most didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in February, the ghetto was announced in January, and I believe it was in mid-February or beginning February. Suddenly, I think it was mid. I came home. I had a brother living a couple blocks away. He was married, and I came home about afternoon, about 4 or 5 o'clock, I don't know. And I've seen something is wrong. That was in February 1940. I think it was mid-February. I looked around. I seen a military truck. I couldn't distinguish the SS from the Gestapo from a plain soldier. But I felt something, I don't know, intuition.
Mm-hmm.
Something is wrong. Something's too quiet. Something is... So I went home. I ran upstairs. I told him something is wrong. My mother was in the house. Says, you know what, my sisters, my brothers, they say, maybe we should take mother over to that brother I came from. So I said, something is wrong there. I felt, says, okay. So I took, all I took is a cushion, it's not a blanket, it's a down-filled...
comforter, quilt.
Comforter. It was very warm, and I took one, and I took my mother, and we walked down. It took me about 3/4 of an hour. Took her to my brother's, and I came home, and I ran up, and we were prepared, though. We had rucksacks packed. We were prepared for something. Suddenly, I hear a shout. It's a big mess downstairs in the quarter. We lived on the 3rd floor. So we were sitting quiet to see what's going to happen. Suddenly we hear rouse and all kinds of shout. You know how you see it in the movies. And I look across we lived on 3rd floor, across the 3rd floor, the blocks were narrow, one's end to the other, you know. We look in, I've seen there was a family called Bumps. It was a little girl about 7 years old. a husband and a wife. That man, Mr. Bones, was deaf. Couldn't hear. And I see in shadow from our window right across somebody like a soldier with a helmet I've seen in a silhouette. He lifts a rifle, you could see that, and just hits in something, and I seen a shadow on the other side, other end of the rifle butt. And I've seen that shadow is just sinking, you know. I thought the shadow wasn't short whether he's hitting a person or he's aiming at our window. So I said, he's aiming at our window. Everybody lay down on the floor. And what happens, later I found out, I said, suddenly then a knock on the door and rouse. We didn't have a chance. We had a chance to grab. We were prepared for something already. The rucksacks, and we ran. But we ran very fast. They were beating on the way, hitting. If you could just, like gauntlet, you know. And there was SS standing there. And we ran down, we came to the courtyard. They ordered us to go to the other side, not the main street, but it was called Adolf Hitler Strasse. It was a street called Polodnova. I think it in English would be the east, I think, west or something like that. Anyway, we went there. In that court, there was a big, I don't know how to call it, the hall before the portals. There was always gates and all that thing. Was already a mass of people standing. And more people came. And I gave a look around, across, was stairs to go out to other apartments. It was empty. We had how you call it, the watchman, caretaker. That caretaker was never Jewish. The caretakers were never Jewish. They had a union. Didn't allow Jews in those unions, so he used to be, the gates before the war used to be open till 11 o'clock. 11 o'clock you closed it. And if you wanted to come in, you had to ring a bell. That caretaker came out. Well, he gave him a tip when he opened the door, and he made a few bucks. We also had there a watchman, which was Jewish, a night watchman. He had no right to open that gate and take that few cents for that thing. Now, when we were standing, we ended up standing there, and the Germans on the pointing guns at us, assembled, I looked back, around, across me. Not I, everybody. I talked just to myself. A corpse is laying. He had a beard, that watchman. I see him, and all his insides was out. So, well, naturally, we knew what happened. He was the first. He probably opened the gate, and he was killed. They called me and other younger kids to pick up the insides, but they were yet nice to us. They gave us a piece of cardboard to pick it up. And other places I heard that told them to use their hands. They showed us a box with sand. We had to take this thing and throw it in and just shove it in the side where he was laying. I was standing there, and that little girl, which I was mentioning before, that family from across the street, she was crying, and her mother, we stood right beside them. She told what happened. The Germans came out and told her husband something. He was deaf. He didn't hear. They figured he doesn't want to answer. So the guy, the German SS, with a bat, he killed him there, right on the spot. Because he didn't answer something he didn't hear. That little girl started crying. Was there one guy on guard with a gun. He called her over. She was afraid to go. My sister took her by the hand and took her away. If German says go, you go. He gave her a box. She told her not to cry anymore. The box consisted of heavy salt, you know, the coarse salt. Well, the little girl still cried. We stood there until everybody came down. Then they took us out in a march across the street. That street was once was called Polodnova, the other one Zawadzka, a name of a Polish hero. Right across. They took us into a courtyard, which was already, Zawadzka tree, was already filled up with people. We were standing there for hours. It was cold. It was a cold night. Everyone was tired for fear, not from work, for fear. What's going to happen? Came about dawn. we had ordered to start marching. And they were killing people on the way with butts or somebody moved. Or something.
With shooting and...
No, I didn't hear shooting then.
Beating?
But later, beating, yeah. We started going out. If I was to go out at Piotrkowska, the street was already full of marchers. They stopped a group, they made place for us. From every block they came out. We joined in. There, we've seen people take more than they could carry. They were supposed to throw away things. There was poles there which picked it up. Some were laughing, some were not, some were joking. And they shouted dirty Jews and all that. They were walking. In the meantime, the Germans were beating whoever they could. And I heard shots then to the people. The rumor went one to the other. One was shot there, one was shot there. Just shooting. We were on the way to the ghetto. The ghetto was about 3 blocks, or 4 blocks, or something like that. Took us for hours and hours. I don't remember exactly when it took us out, but it was still dark. Took us hours to come there to the ghetto.
Because there were so many people?
We walked slow. There were so many people. The ghetto could not absorb that many people. You must know, there was 170,000 people pushed in the ghetto. So anyway, finally we got already to Buchenwald. Buchenwald was the area of the ghetto. Passing by in the middle center before the ghetto, a couple of blocks, and out of it was a monument. Used to be a monument called the Kościuszko monument. We passed by, people says, where's the monument? Because everybody was used. It was a square. Used. That monument was a sign for people who couldn't find a street, they knew it. And it was an old monument. It turned out it was bombed, and they blamed it at Jews. The Jews bombed the Kościuszko monument, and it was on the day of his birthday, a Polish independence. He fought for Polish independence, and the next day they burned all the synagogues. I'm cutting in the middle. And they said the Jews did it, and made a pogrom on Jews. There was some beating Jews. There were still Jews in the city, in the other streets, smaller streets. Well, that's as far as I go with that.
Okay.
And we came to the ghetto, and there was nowhere to sit, nowhere to go, but people found former kinos, that means movie theaters, empty, halls, former factories, former warehouses, and we sat down there, and we found a place, we sat there. People were nice, they came, they brought us soup and all that thing, the poor people from the ghetto. And we sat overnight, in daytime. I went out, my brothers went out. See, while they took us into the ghetto, they kicked the Poles out of that area. And they sent them to the other end of the city. They had to move to the other end of the city. Mid-city, the center city had to be Germanized. No Poles, no Jews. They had a reason in it. They very meticulously figured out. And we were looking around, we looked at the houses which were emptied. Mm-hmm. So me and a brother ran into one house. It was a house we weren't used to, looked like a low, bungalow. Small house. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a bungalow, it was a house, but one room up there. So we took it anyway. We took not the house, we took one floor. Because the other people took first come, first go. And we took our mother, we went back, took our mother. They settled somehow with the rucksacks we had. We had no furniture, no nothing, because we couldn't bring anything. Anyway, we settled in there. We slept the first night on the floor. Then my brother still, who did not live in the main street, there still was time till May, where still Jews coming into the ghetto and other streets. My brother came in, so we had a bed for one person, which had an extra bed. You couldn't even, people who brought it, they couldn't even put it in their apartment. It was too small. They've seen already, they have to go. What happened to the thing? Also, I forgot, there was an apartment block across our street. We were Piotrkowska 16, 17 was across. It was a huge apartment block. It was a block long. They said it was 1,700 people living there. I don't know, I didn't count them. We didn't see nobody coming out from there. The rumor was going around that they were all shot, killed. The whole family. Later it turned out it was true because historically it's proven nobody came out alive from those people.
Can you tell me about your life and your family in the ghetto in the early part?
From the early part, it was hard, was tight, was thousands of people, but it still was a little open. People still brought in food. The people from the city were coming. They brought in food a few months ago. And the farmers still come to the wires and they sold food if you had the money, you know. Some just gave the food and free were some. And what's going on, we still lived. People who didn't have money could live from people who had some, you know. But May 1942, the ghetto was hermetically closed. And though there was anybody going out of the ghetto or come close to the wires would be shot. And it was done. Anybody coming to the wires from the outside or throwing over food or something or taking money for true will be shot. And we were isolated. That same day, like a magic, like a blanket, there was not too much food there, but people ate. Bread, some farmer chickens, everything disappeared. Not to come from the outside. From inside, it seems people who had some had it already, because they've seen there'll be problems. A week later, you've seen people, children with its bloated bellies, like you see Africa things.
Starvation.
My wife asked me, how come it takes me to tears, don't take you, as I've seen it before. And nobody came to help. Babies, 2, 3, we barely walked. You've seen abandoned, walking in the streets. You've seen people dying already. It was just a week. Seems those people didn't have no money and didn't have no food and dying, laying in the sides by the sewers. And it wasn't a funny sight. And it got worse and worse because some people still had some food. There was exchange going. Like, you have that, you have some money, I'll give you some bread or something like that. Money had no
value.
No value. The further it went, a diamond. I don't know how many carats. If you showed a piece of bread like that, the person would give you the diamond. It had no value at all, because if you're dead, you don't need it.
Can't eat diamonds?
No, can't eat diamonds. It came to a point that people were dying, and the Jewish committee, had already started organized to make some order. So they organized the police. And the first thing which was organized, beside the police, was a burial squads. Unlike Warsaw, people were laying the streets for weeks there, they were buried right away. So we've seen already every day platforms with man horses, not horses, we couldn't have no horses. But big platforms with corpses, like hands laying down. They picked them up from the street, and the cemetery, Jewish cemetery, was in the ghetto at the end. And they were buried that day. They were going around, and they didn't have to look much. Every street had something. Then was a thing that they went into the houses to find out whether people are dead. Then came, not a story, you know what a Muslim is, you heard about it. Be it clepsydra. Clepsydra is a necrologue. You know what a necrologue is? If somebody dies, an announcement of someone's dead. You looked at people, you've seen already, you won't be around too long. It was called a death announcement, actually.
Yeah.
And that's what you've seen. It wasn't organized. It started organizing the police. Then some people came and started organizing some kind of kitchens. Because people started dying. Private block kitchens, they called it. And whatever food anybody has extra, they should bring it there, and they brought it. So those people who are starving should have some food, a soup. That was going on for a while. It wasn't enough. People were still dying. They found people swollen in the streets. So the ghetto assembly closed all those kitchens. That took over the whole rationing.
They organized them.
Yeah, start organizing. Then this is how do you get the food? So the Germans said, if you work, you have tradesmen, we'll send in the food for the value of your work. But the value of our work was very small. As much the ghetto produced, like uniform, we had a lot of tailors, shoemakers, uniforms, and we had scientists, we had mechanics, we had things. Whatever they produced, they made the price, not the ghetto. So it came from because Jewish government, there had to be some kind of an exchange. They made an exchange place in Belt Market was a market where the German came together with the Jewish committees to deal. Now, they started giving orders from Germany for the army and then even private, because they had good tailors, good hat makers, ladies and men, and good blacksmiths, carpenters, everything. There was a shortage in machines. We got enough orders, so there was a shortage in machines. So first of all, an order from the ghetto for Walton, for the official came that everybody has to work from the age of 12. Everybody had to have a work.
A permit? Or?
Not the permit. The permit was there before you. Yeah. It was forced. You were forced to work. And you had to have a proof that you are working somewhere. Now there's a shortage in machines. So there's a shortage in machines. So that eldest of the Juden, Rumkowski, I have him in a picture in that book, they decided to make a certain money, which was ghetto money. Looked like money, only Rumkowski was signed and it was valued nothing. But for the ghetto to trade. There wasn't much to trade, but it was. Then they had need machines. They went to the Germans to ask them to release the machines they took away from the Jews. It wasn't their machines. We take it in the ghetto and we be producing. You give us, let's say, potatoes for so many coats or something like that. But they agreed to one thing, that they make the price. Now, the price was very low. They gave the machines because it was for their own good. So everybody worked at the open tailor factories, which thousands of people worked. Straw factories. They made boots for the Russian front. Shoes, high boots, everything, even electronics.
What did your family do? What kind
My family, one chartered accountant, was a bookkeeper in the ghetto. My sister knew how to sew. She had one sister, she's in Israel, she's alive. She was a designer, which means she made designs for big companies, blueprinted designs, clothing for ladies' dresses. And she made the designs, then it started to be like here. They started to produce those designs. So she had a little shop. And the other brothers, one worked in a bookkeeper, one worked in he didn't have no trade, he was a businessman, he worked in a tailor shop. Somehow he learned. Well, they found work for everybody.
How about you? What kind of work were you doing?
I was lucky to get in a kitchen, a soup kitchen, the first soup kitchen, but it was still a block kitchen, in the ghetto. So when the ghetto administration took it over, I stayed there. The benefit was you didn't get no more food than another soup. Between one soup and the other, and another potato in the soup, make the difference between life and death. So I was a lucky man, and everybody opened their eyes, you're lucky. And there was a lot of people which worked in the kitchen because we had to serve, at the beginning, 170,000 people. You can look in here, you see them. They opened the kitchen, then the Germans started sending in food for work. But the food was the price was very low. They started cooking soups with about three potatoes swimming around in it. The people got bloated from those soups, but they had no choice. They had no choice, and they had to take it, whatever it takes. People were still starving, but it started getting a little bit organized. They opened then cooperatives, like government stores, which belonged to the Jewish community, to a ghetto thing, and they started giving ration cards. The rations were very low, not enough to sustain anybody, but it started to get organized already. But people weren't satisfied with that, and they were right. There was a revolt broke out, and they came into those stores, was marches, throw out all, there was a little bit butter or something like that, and bread, throw it out a stamp, and we don't want the Jewish policemen, nor Jewish people should help the Germans in any way, either if we start. They want to kill us, they said, let them do that. Now, the ghetto administration was in a different, of a different mind. So the police came out, the Jewish police, Germans came in, they shot a lot of people with machine gun. And then that march, that protest stopped. They started giving out ration cards, which were very small, but it started to organize a little bit. And so we worked every day. Then they started building a cultural life.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell me about it?
Yeah. The first thing they did, they talked education. It was against the law to have schools in the ghetto. But we have to have education, like kindergartens. Now, how do you send a starving child to school? How will we learn? So when we had the bread rations, everybody decided from the blocks, they cut a piece off, it wasn't enough, to give it to every school and kindergarten should be there, and the thing when a child comes, they should have a bite to eat. And every piece, every crumb counted.
So they started to work
organizing
with the
former teachers. We had a lot of teachers, started organizing kindergartens. There even was a university in secret. There was professors. We didn't have the tools of the laboratories, but theoretically they could teach. So students which were in universities or were starting came to lectures. They were starving, but they came to lectures. Then we had actors. They started to organize theaters. That all was illegal. The Germans find out they shoot the person who illegal one. The first theater was opened on Lutomerska Street, one street, in a basement. It was as big as that room. They made little benches, and I was privileged to get a ticket to that first theater. Was a friend of mine. He used to step dance. He knew how to step dance. So that actor took him as to play. The actors were starving, everything was starving, but the culture has to go on. We can't become animals. Then clubs opened and underground organizations in that starvation. There were groups of intellectuals. There were groups of painters. I have at home a special book with painters from the ghetto. One I knew personally. There were groups of writers. There were groups of songwriters, everything. We had everything except the meat and the food. And you could go to a concert in a basement somewhere. You can hear Chopin or Beethoven. There were people. How do we get the instruments? The people, I told you before, there were people which are smarter than the people which didn't believe it could happen, and they brought us in before they closed the ghetto. So the cultural life was going on, but how many hungry people are interested in reading a book? Libraries were opened, and everybody donated whatever books they had, but how many people were gone on a hungry stomach? There were some. Some weren't interested.
Did you take part in any of those?
Oh, yes.
things? Yeah.
I took part in an underground group. We talked about uprising, how to get in weapons to the ghetto, or how to produce it in the ghetto. Well, the ghetto in Warsaw was situated in a different position than we were. Strategically, it was impossible to smuggle in anything. The whole ghetto was surrounded by wire. Every so many feet was a SS guard with a gun. The ghetto was divided in two. It was a main street going through. To cross the other side, you had to go through a bridge. The Poles were moved out of the center city and the ghetto. They lived exactly right at the other end of the city. Now, to smuggle out, that was tried. You could get maybe through once through the wires if you weren't caught. Mostly people were shot. But how do you get the whole city of Germans through? To get to a Pole, the Germans won't give you a weapon. You aren't sure if the Poles would. But you could try. Warsaw, the ghetto was right in the city. If you could go through a tunnel, somehow you could smuggle in a weapon. And they had a hard time. So then we walked. I remember walking day and nights, especially day we worked. And we sat sitting how to do. We had a metallurgic factory in the ghetto. Now, tried to make some weapons or grenades there. But then the material was so scarce. And what the Germans sent in was counted every ounce of steel, every ounce of metal. And then they were scared. We proposed to one of the leaders there, no dice. Now, we couldn't do nothing. That's well out. But we're still working together, sitting, thinking, suppose the Germans start getting beaten. We hoped and everybody believed they will be beaten, but the question was when. So we always looked up the air to see the French and the English promises, but nothing materialized. Then the hope was on the Russian front. There was also, we didn't have no news. Your radios were forbidden, but there were mechanics and then people who knew how to put the radio together. And we had transmitters and receivers. It was secret. If they caught somebody, people were shot for that. One of my brothers was involved in spreading the news from the radio. He'd listen to it. And the news started coming from the fronts that Germany is getting a little bit of a shellacking. Our hope was already, and the Eastern from the EU, we won't get nothing from the West. That we hope that the Russians win, closer, faster. Now, that's as far I can tell you now. It was also, later the ghetto organized, they got permission somehow from the Germans, because the Germans found out, and Jewish administration was scared. If the Germans find out where those theaters are, they shoot those people. Somehow you got out from them by promise to give more work or something like that, to open a house of culture. There was a street, Krawiecka Street, there was Taylor Street. There used to be a theater before the war. They opened a theater there. They started making plays. And they played everything, from Jewish plays to Shakespeare and all kinds of plays. It was hard to get a ticket because there was a lot of people hungry for a little bit of theater and comedy and that, because they had artists there, many artists, from the Polish theater, from Jewish theater, Jews. Yeah. And that's how the culture went on. Then was groups which studied together, like we used to read, let's say, a book together. Sure. You couldn't do nothing else.
What was the religious life like?
Well, the religious life, the more religious you were, the harder you had it. The religious life was, very Orthodox people were the same as they were. They had a room, they came together to pray. They couldn't eat once if they have a ration of meat, which was seldom happened. It turned out to be horse meat. I ate it, but my family didn't. The religious people didn't, so they depended only on that piece of bread they had. Let's say if you got once some margarine, they didn't think it's kosher. So they were dying out. They had a very hard time. Now, my family had an advantage. My mother was offered, there were advantageous people there too. There were 2 or 3 rations. The ones who were in government, higher up, they had called Bayrat, extra rations. My mother was offered extra ration for the family. But she didn't want it. She says, if other Jews are dying, we'll die too. If they live, we'll live. I will not. Because that ration, which the ones who took extra, was taken away a piece, a little bit from the other people. So she didn't want that. We didn't have it, only there was easing on that because of my ration. Because I worked in a kitchen, I left my cards. I still got cards, ration cards. So that little piece of bread or something I left for the family because I stole a potato then. So that's how it was going on. In 1942, because I can't to tell everything, it'll take a year. In 1942, in spring, I think, I don't know the date exactly, suddenly there was Bekanntmachung, that means announcements. There'll be a Gesperr. A Gesperr means a curfew. In the ghetto for 10 days or 14 days, I don't remember. Everybody has to stay in the house. Children have to stay with their families. If anybody will be found in the street, will be shot. We knew already that was deportation, because there were deportations before, but one like that, never. Nobody went to work, nobody went nowhere. We had the coupons for rations. They gave coupons for rations for the week, which was very little. Now with the rations, I have to tell you, some people divided the rations. They kept that little piece of bread for another day. Some people ate it as soon as they get it. And those people were dying because next day they had nothing. And that piece, you could eat it in one minute because it wasn't much. They used to, I'm coming to that Gesperr, that curfew. And they gave us the rations, but the stores didn't have the product, because the Germans didn't give them the product. So people took what they could, what they got, and we had to stay at home. We all were starving. Even the ones who could ration the thing. We were all starving. And suddenly, Germans came in, which seldom came in the ghetto. They depended on the Jewish police to do everything. All the resorts, the shops were closed. If Germans come in the ghetto, that's even worse. They are shooting, and we found out there's a deportation of a mass scale. Now, we could run in side lanes if we knew you could somehow avoid the Germans. There was a main street in the ghetto called Brzezinska, that street which went to the city of Brzezin. That was in the ghetto part, and the Jewish cemetery was at the end of the street. So I was the youngest, more adventurous, so to side streets, I looked where the Germans are taking out people. I've seen them taking out people. I've seen him grab a child, one of the German, burly, big guy, was trucks with the 4 wheels in the back. I don't know exactly the age of the child. It was a child about 3, 4, 5. It was running and crying. He grabbed that child by the legs and just on the tire, hit the head on the tires. And I seen the head flattened. There was nothing there. He took the corpse and just threw it in. They took children, they threw it in like logs, something. Old people like logs in the trucks. Younger people had to go up. They were beaten, half dead. I seen that the Germans started, I was watching, the Germans started moving there. Well, my interest was my mother. Our mother, we still have owned. So I was watching as the Germans, when they finished that thing, how long it'll take. I've seen the trucks moving away from there, yeah? So I knew they were going to set, they'll go to every house and everything. There were Jewish police too were running, grabbing people. Some places they grabbed people, some places they were beaten with axes. People defended themselves and let them in. That was meant we didn't want Jews to take part in those things. And they were grabbing people, some didn't. They've seen people, they're hiding, they just looked away, but some were bastards, just left plain and simple. We had scum too. They grabbed, and they figured, they were promised, if you bring Jews to me, you'll stay alive. We won't touch the police. Now, my thinking was, what's going on in that street? I've seen the trucks moving away with people shouting and babies crying and blood coming through the trucks. But as soon as they start moving away, I looked at them. We lived in a street called Marinarska. I've seen them go away, so I ran home. I said my mother should come with me. I told him they are leaving there. My mother was older than we are. They were. Same thing, I took a bat, gave on to the thing, and took my mother, went to the side, so took her across the other side where I've seen the Germans were leaving. And went to other streets. Anyway, they was going on for a few days. They said it's supposed to go on, I think, 10 days, 14 days. They stopped earlier. But that time, half a ghetto almost was cleaned up. We came out, was lots of room. But that was...
You have a picture here of yourself when you were working in the ghetto.
I've come to that,
yeah,
exactly.
okay.
See, I was working in... the people were taken away. Nobody knew what. They said they were taken to work or something like that. But that didn't look that way. Also about the letter. I had a letter started circulating right after the deportation, a week after that deportation, that somebody wrote, a rabbi, I have the text of it, from a small cities, wrote their friend, and he told him, like the letter was a plea, because people didn't believe still that people were being killed or something anyway. So he wrote a letter. He had an eyewitness that those people which the Germans took out from the ghetto will never come back. They're dead. They shouldn't believe a word what they tell him about work. They said in a city right by Kolo, Helmno, people are being shot or they're being killed by gas. And all that in their plea and they prayed to God. They should help Israel and something like that. And unsigned a name there, I don't remember the name. I didn't meet people seeing that letter, nor did many people said. Some people, yeah, the letter says, you think it's written by a madman, but it's not. And he signs a name, Rabbi so-and-so. Some people started thinking, and some people didn't believe that they thought it's a madman. But it woke up the population. Where are the people after a week? You don't see nothing. Suddenly in May, but I don't remember, April, May, beginning of May, right at the end of the month of deportation, masses of clothing were coming on trucks. That 4 depots, one on Franciszkańska, one on Marinarska where I lived. The end was a big apartment block. And a couple, I don't remember where, on Skerska, something like that. Nobody knew where the clothing comes from. They figured maybe the Germans became their hearts soft and they sent clothing to the ghetto for people to wear. Nobody knew, and no news from those people. Some people started thinking about, not believing the letter exactly. What's happening to those people? Now, suddenly, in the same month, May, people worked in kitchens or improvisation, like food. They were stronger in the ghetto. They were picked up. They said, you have to go to work for a week. You can still have your soups and your things for a week in certain places. They didn't say where. I was assigned to a place, before the war used to be like a shopping center for vegetables and fruit. Mm-hmm. I remember it from before the war, little stalls, little rooms that you could buy potatoes, you could buy things, and flowers and all kinds of stuff. I was assigned to Franciszkańska Street. That was right beside the Kriminalpolizei, if you heard who they were. They were worse than the Gestapo. They all were good. Even worse than that. Anybody going in there didn't come out. And it was right beside a church. There was a church in the ghetto. Included in the ghetto, because that's how the map came out. Went in there. I was assigned there. I came to work one morning. I didn't know what I'm going to do. I look in, all those little holes, which you used to sell vegetables and flowers, but packed with clothing, packed to the brim. You couldn't get in on the door even. All around. And I went in a corner somewhere. They told me, you work here. I was a foreman there. A few foremen go in and pick out clothes. Jackets to jackets, shirts to shirts, and things like that. I came in, there was other people sitting there. I smelled bad. The clothing, though, looked clean. Only you've seen some stains on it. We didn't know. The stains, if you broke them, they broke, you know. Mm-hmm. The people sitting there didn't realize what it is. I picked one jacket up, and I felt in the pocket something, you know. We looked around. I took out, it was a piece of bread, only it has that funny color. It was greenish, blue, something that, not like bread, but I was very hungry. So I bit, it was a small, tiny piece. I bit into it. The taste was, I spit it out right away. It was a funny taste. I never tasted something like that. I was young and I didn't think. I should have taken that piece of bread to give it to some community members and think, but I didn't think about it. You know, you don't think always right. I didn't know what it is. I told people, well, nothing. From telling, that's nothing. But there were many more pieces of bread like that, you know. And the clothing was picked up. That clothing was signed, if it was good. They opened a laundry. Yeah, the question was, who is that clothing coming from? From some clothing, papers fell out with passports or identification from Czechoslovakia, from Lodz, Poland, from Brno and Czechoslovakia, from Vienna. See, a lot of people were sent into the ghetto, to Lodz ghetto, from all kinds of cities. So those, some people which were more brain than I have in a piece of bread, took those and they brought it to people, brought it out. They started thinking, who are those people? Where are those people? They still weren't sure whether people had something to do, had to do with the clothing. But then some clothing was brand new. But they did not know what the clothing they think has a connection with the deportations. Mm-hmm. Anyway, that letter woke people out. They started testing. They started testing the stains on that thing. Blood, when it dries, it breaks. We had scientists that took it on the microscopes they had already then, made their own, or brought in by the Germans, some for the hospitals. They said that those pieces of bread they find on the clothing, there's a gas. They didn't know what kind. They also didn't know where it's coming from. There still was no connection with those deportees. But people started thinking already after that letter.
Could you show us the picture now that you have of yourself? I'm not sure if there's one on page 13 and 113
and 139.
Yeah.
You turn it around.
Yeah. 13. There's 13.
What is this one? I'm walking to work. See, there's a bridge here.
Okay, maybe you can...
I walked across the bridge. That's me. In a kitchen. You see, I carry a pot. Everybody carried a pot.
And this is a close-up of the bridge.
Yeah. There was the center. See, you can see the guard, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, right down.
See the guard. You went to that wire. See, the street was Aryan. The sidewalk was Ghetto. Because they had the streetcar going through there, but nobody could go through. He was shot. Anybody touching the wire was shot. Here is a pile of that clothing. I am here. Right here. That's the piles of the clothing.
Okay. And then I guess after that, the cards were being sent out. You were telling about the wedding invitations.
Yeah, right. I was coming to. Yeah. That was it was a lot before they were gone. Somehow, about that those clothing, people started thinking. Weren't sure. started thinking something wrong. We didn't see nobody back. In February, yeah. February, or a couple of weeks before, January, at the end of January, or beginning of February, was announcements. I'm talking already about from 42, I jumped to 44.
To 44 now.
There was announcements that all people which work, there's 1,500 people are needed for work outside the ghetto. And those who should come, the people should be healthy and the younger people. Preferably people who work in the improvisation and the kitchens and food. Well, after that letter, there were people, and they made announcements once to send people to Posen. They went voluntarily, but everybody figured they'll, at least they have more food. Whatever it'll be, hard work, but they have more food. And they promised that. They took people out. Some people came from Posen back. This is not true. They just were killing people. On the job. They didn't talk about the burnings in Gassington. On the job. Well, a few came back. Yeah, there was announcements, 1,500 people. Well, after that letter, there were no takers. You know. Whatever they believed or not, there was already
a strong suspicion anyway.
Yeah. Then after a week or so, some people went, some people they cut in their... No, that was they should come by themselves. Then they sent out invitations, like we called it wedding invitations, because other people got, which were before, excuse me. I got a wedding invitation. Well, my family says, you're not going. I said, too, I'm not going either. But I didn't know how to work out. But I couldn't stay at home, because at home the police will come. If you didn't come on that day, the police, the Jewish police would come and pick me up. So I hid at my sister's place. She had a place, she had an attic. I hid there. I was hiding there for about a couple of weeks. Well, that was in April, March. A couple of weeks. Now, they couldn't get no takers. Whoever they cut. And the transport, if it had to be 1,500 people, the Germans gave an order. That order had to be carried out. They started catching people in the streets to fulfill the order. They had, let's say, 700, 800. They needed another 700. But the Germans came to check. Those were not fit. They wanted this time fit people, and there was two reasons. The healthy bit was after the Warsaw uprising. The Germans knew already they're getting a beating. I mean, in Russia. They were worried if the people all kept Cedrus, what I said there, like Muslim. But the healthier people might give him some trouble. The scene in Warsaw was an uprising in mid the war. Here, almost for they're getting a beating, they started retreating a little bit. They were afraid that there might be trouble. So they took all the healthier people, and besides, the other reason, because they were short on manpower for work, not for killing. And they wanted younger people for two purposes: to get them out of the ghetto, not to be able to defend themselves, which it was prepared, and labor. The factories were empty. They didn't have no young people to work.
So you were in hiding?
Yeah, I was in hiding. Then one day there was an announcement. The Germans rejected other people, you know. Announcement, and then you who to get. If the people who didn't come, which got those cards, coal cards, that don't come at a certain time, they block all the ration cards for the whole families. Now then, if I seen that, and they didn't play around, you know. I've seen that, so I told my sister I'm leaving, and I'll go home. I'll say goodbye to my mother and my family. And there was a jail, a prison. You're supposed to come there. And I'll go out there, and I'll go out. So I said, you're not going. What about the way we live? You'll live. You'll see to that you should be share. But I knew without rations, we'll all die. I might have not, because I had friends working in kitchens. They'll smuggle a potato or something. But the whole family, they couldn't support. And not only my family, either relatives even. So I picked up my sister, started crying. I shouldn't go because they knew they'll send me away. I came home. So my mother says, why are you home here? They'll catch you. She says, I came and I'm going to give myself up. Why? Because of the rations. We'll all die. It's no use sit around. Because of me. Anyway, I went, I said goodbye, and I went to that prison, reported myself, registered me. And we sat in prison for a while. The 10th of March 1944, they took us out, took us into the railway station at the end of the ghetto. It was called Marichin something, I forgot the name, Lodz. They took us there, and they loaded us on wagons, and cattle wagons, but not too tight. We had room in those cattle wagons. I don't know how the other wagons were. I know now it was one. And they took us, and we started going. We traveled for a while. Then we stopped. They opened our wagon. It seemed to me that the Germans knew exactly who was going, who they have, and what they have. Because they opened that wagon. They took from that wagon out about 25 people, like they're called, you, like a selection. And they opened another wagon. They took from there a few people. So we came in another wagon, yeah, I remember. And the rest was a lot of wagons. The rest wasn't open, and they called out some people. I think it was a group of about 50 people. Well, 50, because we counted later. And the marcher came a guy with a white-haired guy and a white coat, you know. We didn't know who it is, and told us to stretch out our hands. See, my hands are not shaking, do you see? Mm-hmm. And look the other side. There's a whole bunch of people outstanding. Then he did a second selection. And that second selection, he pointed at me, he pointed at my friend and other people. And the rest, which was left, then he took away from the group, marched up, he said, the rest go back to the wagons. And while we were standing, the wagons closed, and we were standing there about an hour. And the wagons started moving, and we didn't know where we were going. It turned out we seen a sign, Kelce. So I heard about Kelce. I was never there, but it's Polish city. Because in the wagons, we didn't know where we are. And we started, it took us marching there. We started to march then in some kind of a small camp. To us, about the whole camp had about 500 people, maybe less. We came in there. So inside was already Germans marched us there. Inside was already Jewish. One policeman, and that's all they needed. And the president of the ghetto, of the camp, like the Lagerführer, he was the leader of the ghetto. We from Lodz came dressed quite nicely for that time of the era, that time. Now, they told us my mother sold in some Polish silver zlotys. See, Lodz was taken into the Third Reich. Lodz became Germany, an area. Mm-hmm. The other areas became called the General Government, the Protectorate. That was called occupied territory. But Lodz was incorporated in Germany on Hitler's orders. Now, my mother had that silver 10 zlotys. She didn't know where I'm going, but that she didn't have nobody to give it. She said, take it, maybe you can use it, silver. And we had nice coats, dressed nicely. See, everything was gone together, but people still had some clothing or shoes. We came in that camp because a guy, Rosenblatt, was his name. He says, all you guys who came from Lodz should undress naked for cleaning and blousing. That means we should have no lice for taking a shower. He says, put the bundles, each one should put his bundle. They showed us the banks on his bank, and when you come back, you'll have your bundle. So we listened, we're all naked. We got a shower, there was a shower there, and there was real water came out from that shower. And we came back, we didn't see the bundles. He says, how are we going to be naked? He says, you'll get your clothing. But we didn't get our clothing anymore. We got some torn rags and stuff like that. We didn't know who took it. We knew they took it, but I know maybe the Germans or something. We found out why they took it. When we went, next morning we went to work. It took us to work. It was a shop making tips for bullets. Machine gun bullets, all kinds of bullets. There's machines working there. We were in contact with the Polish workers worked beside us in the factory. In the camp we are separate. Now, they knew I worked with the Polish workers. He says, what did you bring? In Polish, he says, what do you mean what I brought? I didn't bring nothing. He says, it's funny, you came here, I should have had clothing, I would have bought it from you. I realized then why those guys in the camp took out. You bought it, they brought bread, they gave me a jacket, they brought... So those guys ate good. We were starving. Because they didn't give us food. They gave us a little piece of bread. They had flour soup all the time. We had no choice. We had the flour soup. They kept us alive in the camp.
How long were you at this camp?
At that camp in Kelts, I wasn't long. I was a few months. I don't remember. I think I came there in March, May, June. No.
And this is where you learned how to do the
there I learned, and they made me, I got a machine, or two machines I worked on, and I had a helper there. I was handy. They knew who to pick. They weren't, in this sense, they were very meticulous. They knew who to pick. Anyway, we were there, let's say, March I came there, August. Yeah, till about beginning of August, I think. Because it was quite warm yet. In August, September, it's hot in Europe, it's warm. And beginning of August, we stopped. They told us in the camp, you're not working anymore, but we had to unload the machines, lower them, disassemble them, and lower them through windows and trucks. And they took them away somewhere, we didn't know where. But while we were doing it, we did a little bit sabotage, you know. There are certain things, small parts of the machines, if you haven't got it, you can turn the machine. The one who made smooth, especially that one, the bullet tip. If it's not polished, then it wouldn't shoot. You can do nothing. We did sabotage in the factory too. Certain small type of sabotage. So we took a hammer. All you had to do, break one tooth in it. There was little teeth, and that's it. Broke it. We let down the machines, and the camp moved. They said they're closing that factory. So we let it down. It was we worked all night, and they told us, took us back to the camp. Next morning came, aufstehen, and everybody get up, and we marched out. And we marched to the street. There was some trucks there. Okay.
Okay, you can take it for where you went to the orphanage.
Yeah, they sent me to that orphanage, and I didn't stay there. They found me right away a place for boarding room for $55 a month, but I didn't have no money. I didn't have the $55 a month. I had some, but it's not enough. And I needed a job right away. So those friends, those people who lived there, those boys, one worked at Grand Motors on Main Street. He says, you know what, if you want a job, I can ask my boss. And I got a job next day. I got $24 a week, but I got a job. It's already money. I went to wash fuel pumps. They used to make fuel pumps. But while I was there, I knew I can do better because I'm a machinist. I'm not I went around, looked around with that little English. I found a place. It was called Gillis and Warren Automotive Machinery. If you work on one machine, you know how to work on another. I went in. I couldn't express myself. I said, I looked for work. What do you know, machine? I said, and you have broken machine. It was a foreign. It was nice. There was no Jews there working. Nobody I could translate. So he asked me, what is this? He showed me, can you work on that machine? He says, showed him with a head, with a gesture, yes. And then he showed me another machine, can you work on that? I says, yes, because I've seen a machine like that. And he took me in, and I worked there, and then, I worked 2 weeks for $24. Then I got exactly double. That was $45 or $50. That was a lot of money then, at that time. And everybody was asking, how come a Jewish boy has a trade like that? Because it wasn't a Jewish trade. I was supposed to be a tailor, shoemaker, but work at machines. And anyway, I went there. And then I changed that job. I worked at Kilbury machine shop, which they used to make farm machinery. But I worked at machines, like turret lathes and stuff like that. Then I decided that I want to change trade because you couldn't go too far. You couldn't open your own. So you needed a lot of money to open your own machine shop and things like that. And I thought of going a little further. So I went in, and other guys, they were in upholstery, a lot of Jewish boys. So I went into a shop, the Century Upholstery, and I worked there for 8 years. While working there, I met my wife to a date or something like that. And I decided to marry her. And we got married in '56. Then I decided to go in business. I didn't have much money, but I decided to go in business, and I got friends, so I made myself a good credit in the bank. And I got a loan, and I bought a business which was called a very established fruit business, which everybody knew. I know you're younger people, you don't know. Variety Fruit on Burroughs, Maine. That was very prominent in the city. People from the south and from the west and from the east all came around. At 3 deliveries a day, I employed 4 people, and we did quite good. I worked very hard at the deliveries. There, they sold, my wife couldn't take it too long, and we sold that business. And we went about, we traveled a little bit by car, and yeah, my little girl, my daughter, was born there at Main Street in Boris. So I paid part of the building, and then to pay the rest, I sold that other lot. A little manipulating, you know. Now I have that building, I have that thing. I have some income coming. I'm not poor. I managed well. And one day my daughter was sent the kids to the best schools. I went to Ramad, went to Talmud Torah. They finished there. My son is going now to the University of Winnipeg. My daughter went to University of Manitoba, but she stopped short. She has gave me 3 grandchildren. My son is still going. He thinks to go somewhere to a yeshiva. He wants to go, I don't know. It wasn't going very bad at the time. People go broke, people come back. It turned out my daughter comes home, Dad, Mom, I knew something's going to go around with a boyfriend. But she didn't say, we're going to get married. She brought in there, introduced me to a man, of course, also from university. He's now a lawyer. So this is David Cohn. And she said, just like that, we want to get married. She said, oh, fine, sit down, let's, you know. It turned out, listen to that, this is the end, but this is an interesting story. I bought that business from a man who bought it, that Cohn used to own that business, yeah? Okay. That David Cohn used to live there, in that house. He moved out when he was 6 years old. Person, but I forgot their name already, and she's a good friend of my daughter. They went together to university. Bought that store from the Cohns, yeah? She was sick. They had a daughter. I bet you know the daughter. I forgot their second name, their last name. She was there. She moved when she was 6 years old. My daughter moved in there when she was 6 years old. And Cohn, which sold me the business, Cohn, which sold me the building, which I bought from somebody else, became my in-laws, you know. And they all went, were 6 years old, sleeping in the same room. So I used to make a joke, she slept in the same room with them before we were married. So how many? Not together, in different times, you know. So it turned out, and I was surprised. I mean, now we are Machetonum, you know. Mm-hmm. It turned out that the old thing, the girl's name, I forgot what is the name. You would know them.
So now you're retired?
Now I had in 82, I had a heart attack. My doctor doesn't allow me to work. So I have, I prepared myself. I have insurance, private insurance, which I paid for many years. And I have some income from one house and another house, and, you know, you prepare yourself. I'm managing fine. Canada didn't do me no harm. And I have 3 nice grandchildren. The one was just born a couple of weeks ago. 2 boys and a girl. And that's, here I am.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Nordon, then, for your time and for sharing all this with us.
Thank you for listening to me.